We'll be going over IRS Notice CP297. This is the notice of intent to seize your assets and a notice of your right to a hearing. So this is very similar to IRS Notice CP90. Actually, if you put them side by side, it would be very hard to tell the difference. There's one nuance basically that I saw that really doesn't mean a big difference. So if you happen to receive this notice, it's basically you probably have received or should have received multiple notices in the past, and now you're really up against kind of a deadline. So I would recommend that you proceed very cautiously in this. So we'll walk through this step by step. As usual, we're going to walk through the top part of this form. I'll kind of explain to you some of the things that I think you should pay attention to. So up at the top right corner, you see the notice number, CP297, followed by the notice date. So this is the very first thing that I would caution you to pay attention to. The notice date is going to trigger your timeline on, in this case, the collections process. So, and as you can see down here, you basically have 30 days from the time of this notice to request an appeal. So that's actually in federal law, as well as the IRS guidelines about the collections process. So once the notice date is out on the streets, it doesn't matter if you actually have this notice in your hand. That's the timeline that the IRS operates with. And I say this because as we go through this, a lot of taxpayers don't take the time to keep their address up to date. So in this case, this is a business address. Normally, filing your tax return will take care of updating your address, but sometimes people will complain about the IRS notice going to the wrong address. And to this point, the IRS encourages everyone to keep their address up to date in their tax record to minimize that risk. So you can file your tax return. If you're in between tax returns, you can call the IRS to update your address, or you can file the official change of address notice. So for individuals, that would be IRS Form 8822. For business owners, such as this case, that would be IRS Form 8822-B. So let's take a closer look at this. So this basically says that under the Internal Revenue Code, they're going to start seizing your property to pay back taxes. So the billing summary contains the amount of tax that you owed, as well as the penalty for failure to pay, and then interest that's accrued. And as we go through this notice, we'll walk through how they break down those a little bit further. But the bottom line up here is you've got a total amount due. The IRS highly recommends that you pay this as soon as possible. But if you want to appeal, then you have until 30 days from this notice date, which in this case is February 22nd, 2019. Now, if you simply just want to make the payment to the IRS and get it all done, the IRS will make it very easy for you. So you can mail this to the IRS address. I circle back up here because you see that there's an address up here. If you're going to use this payment voucher, you should always use the address down here with the payment voucher. So that's tip number one, is to use the payment voucher here. Tip number two would actually be to avoid using a payment voucher at all and simply going to the IRS website and paying directly. So you have a couple of options. But if you do make your payment with a voucher, you should make your check or money order payable to the U.S. Treasury. Then you would write your taxpayer ID number, which in this case is an employer identification number, the tax period, and the form numbers on your payment. So on your check or money order. And then you would put that in the envelope, mark it to this address, not necessarily the address at the top of the letterhead. So the IRS plans to start seizing assets on or after February 22nd. to pay off this debt. So they can do a lot of things. They can withhold your tax refund, which they would probably do, would have done ahead of time. They can also seize bank assets, investment account assets. They can seize personal property or real estate. They can put a claim against your Social Security earnings or other government payments. So there's a lot of things that the IRS can do as long as they follow the process. So the collections process. So do pay this pretty close attention. However, if you disagree with their assessment, you can request what's known as a collection due process hearing. And again, that's within the 30 days of this receiving of the notice date. So you would use IRS form 12153. That's the request for a collection due process or a CDP hearing. So that will temporarily put a pause on the collections process until your appeal goes through its normal channels. And then based on the outcome, then the IRS will either resume or stop the collections process based on that. So do file your request for a due process hearing by this date, because if you don't, then you lose certain privileges or abilities. For example, if you file for a hearing after that date, you can get the hearing, but if you lose the hearing in the Office of Appeals at the IRS, you cannot then turn around and challenge that decision in tax court. So under the normal collection due process hearing, if the IRS disagrees with you, you can challenge that in court. It starts at the U.S. tax court and goes as high as the U.S. Supreme Court. So you can use judicial review if you believe that you have the facts at hand and you don't think that the IRS did everything according to the law. But you have to do that in a timely manner. So there's some information about tax liens. There's another slip if you want to update your contact information. There's some more verbiage about what happens if you don't pay your tax debt. Specifically, there's a reference to limitations on the State Department, and what the federal law does is if you owe more than $52,000, then the State Department basically will revoke your passport. They won't let you travel out of the country through any points of entry or ports of entry using your passport. If you've applied for a passport, they won't issue it or renew it. So there is another aspect to your tax debt. Here's some more discussion about where they can pull your property from. And then there's additional information. In this case, this was from IRS Form 941. So we'll put links in the show notes, by the way, to references to the resources that we've produced on any of the forms mentioned here. So in case you want to watch a video or go through an article about that particular form, we'll put those links in the show notes. So there's some verbiage about how the IRS calculates the failure to pay penalties. You can have penalties reduced or removed under several different programs. One, if you have reasonable cause. For example, if there is a family member death or illness, if you were in a natural disaster like a hurricane or a tornado and you lost your financial records, there are ways that you can have penalties reduced or removed for reasonable cause. If this is your first time, then you can request what's known as a first-time abatement, penalty abatement. Or if you requested advice from the IRS, you gave them all the information they needed, they gave you advice back in writing that you used, and then that advice was held against you and you were penalized, you can remove the penalty for that. And you would submit the IRS Form 843, which is your request for abatement. So you can't abate interest charges directly. However, the IRS will recalculate your interest in the case that penalties are reduced or removed. If the tax is recalculated, the IRS will recalculate the interest based on what should have been calculated. So if you do end up, fighting this and you get the tax reduced, or if you get penalties abated, the IRS will recalculate the interest so that you're not paying interest that you shouldn't be paying. And then finally, there's links and notes about additional resources. So I'm going to take a quick look at this just so that you can kind of see, what is on the IRS website. CP297. You'll request a payment plan. You can do that by filing either online through the IRS website or by filing IRS Form 9465. And if you get into a payment plan, then that stops the collections process from the IRS. So you wouldn't get anything seized if you're actually in a payment plan. That stops the seizure or the levy process. So there's a little bit more detail here, but there's not really anything that wasn't covered in the notice. So that about does it for this notice, IRS notice CP297. Again, we'll put links in the show notes. So if you like our articles, please subscribe to our newsletter. If you like our YouTube videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you have any questions or comments, or if there's another topic that you'd like to see covered in an upcoming video, please hit me up in the comments section. Thank you very much and have a great day.